many people manage to escape from North Korea?
I personally even experienced watching public execution. Millions of people died of starvation in 1990s, and many children actually were living on the street during those several years.
We did not have enough space to lie down. We slept sitting upright, leaning on each other's back.
Few teenagers watched South Korean drama Squid Game, and 3 of them were executed publicly, 15 and 16-year-olds.
I was 17. My survival instinct told me I need to escape.
Imagine you're just 11 years old, summoned to the town square alongside every other kid in your neighborhood, forced to watch a man tied to a post. A firing squad steps forward, rifles raised. The first bullet rips through the prisoner's eyes, and the crowd screams, but you can't look away. That was normal life for Timothy Cho, a North Korean child caught in one of the most repressive regimes on Earth. He didn't just watch horrors, he lived them. Eventually, he'd be locked up in cells so cramped there was no room to lie down, forced to witness shameless brutality, starved to the brink, and beaten senseless for the crime of existing. For Timothy, this was reality not once, but 4 separate times. And somehow, he got out alive. Today we're plunging into a twisted underworld of political mania, prison gulags, and a system of torture so extreme, it makes Hollywood's darkest spy thrillers look tame. This is not fiction. Every fact has been verified, every grim detail is anchored in survivor testimony and human rights reports. Prepare for a narrative that's part espionage thriller, part survival epic, and 100% real. How did a terrified teenager manage to cross one of the world's most militarized borders twice? How did a single photo taken by a student spark an international storm that saved Timothy from a certain death? And most shockingly, how on earth did a feared South Korean gangster help Timothy cheat execution for good? Timothy Cho was born to parents who were both high school teachers, an otherwise respectable standing in North Korea. Growing up, he thought of the Kim family as near divine figures.
I loved them. I thought they were God, because I was brainwashed, and I didn't know.
That kind of indoctrination starts basically when you're in diapers. School children are drilled to respect and praise the Kim dynasty 24/7. But one morning, when Timothy was only 9, he came home to an empty house. His parents had vanished. They had fled across the border to China without warning. In North Korean society, that's high treason. Yeah, we're talking potential execution level betrayal. Overnight, Timothy went from a normal patriotic kid to an orphaned branded son of a betrayer.
My auntie and uncle were there. They would not ask me if I had eaten at all. So I left to my uncle's house in tears and then went to the market picking up food on the floor.
No one would hire him. Authorities shunned him and even relatives turned him away. He joined the ranks of the Kotjebi, the homeless children scavenging through train stations, living off scraps, and sleeping in corners. This was the mid to late 90s, during what the North Korean regime called the Arduous March, a catastrophic famine that killed up to 1 million people. Timothy scrambled for leftover corn or grains, sometimes going days without anything but water. Eventually, his grandmother took him in, but food was scarce everywhere. Meanwhile, the regime hammered into people's heads that Kim Jong-il was the nation's savior, single-handedly defending them from a world of imaginary enemies.
And when I was 7, Kim died. First, Kim died. And I literally cried and didn't sleep for 3 nights.
For Timothy, daily existence became a real-life version of the Hunger Games, minus any glamour or tributes. The only difference? There was no one coming to rescue him. By age 17, he realized he had no future in North Korea. Starvation was a constant threat, and the stigma of his parents' defection made him feel hopeless. He decided to escape. That's right, a teenager, hungry and alone, risking his life to cross one of the most guarded frontiers on Earth, because staying behind meant certain death. So in the early 2000s, Timothy Cho made his first break for the Chinese border. It's a move that countless North Koreans have attempted, but few accomplish. At that moment, you might have thought that good news was finally coming, but fate had something entirely different in store. In 2004, Timothy joined 17 other North Koreans desperate to flee. Their plan? Cross into China, trek through unforgiving terrain, then slip over the Mongolian border and request asylum. If they succeeded, they might find a path to South Korea or another sanctuary. If caught, they'd be sent right back to North Korea, a fate that could mean prison, torture, or a bullet to the head. They actually got close to Mongolia, but in the final moments, Chinese security forces swooped in and arrested the entire group.
They were warning us to stop, and then they started shooting in our way, and you could see that bullet comes next to your feet. We were no longer able to run and were arrested there.
The authorities labeled them illegal economic migrants. Under a pact with Pyongyang, Beijing forcibly deports North Koreans, turning a blind eye to the horrors that await them back home. As soon as Timothy's group landed back on North Korean soil, they were split up and thrown into different detention centers. He was shoved into a cramped cell with about 50 inmates. People were half-starved, packed like sardines, and reeking of sweat and terror. Timothy soon discovered that prison in North Korea is basically slow-motion torment. If he was lucky, he got 2 watery scoops of cornmeal a day. He was aggressively interrogated by the guards, demanding to know whether he'd met any Westerners that helped him plan this escape. One horrifying morning, he experienced a shocking reminder of how dangerous the prison was.
When I woke up, I realized that the man I was leaning against was dead. He died from torture, lack of medical care, and starvation.
The guards came in, dragged the corpse out like a rag doll, while Timothy just sat there, numb. It's the kind of trauma that would break most people. Public executions are routine in North Korea, but dying anonymously in a cramped cell is even more common, especially for state-branded traitors who attempt to defect. And if you're inspired by Timothy's resilience and want more survival stories, hit that like button and subscribe to How to Survive. Before we follow Timothy's next big move, let's talk about where he nearly perished, the North Korean prison system. You've probably heard of Gulags from your high school history class on the Soviet Union. Well, the North Korean version is still alive and kicking, an ugly network of labor camps, interrogation centers, and secret facilities. The United Nations calls them crimes against humanity. Amnesty International has compared them to Nazi-era horrors. This isn't some outdated 1950s scenario. It's happening now. An estimated 80,000 to 120,000 North Koreans currently remain trapped in labor camps, according to Amnesty International. Some are children no older than Timothy was. In these facilities, people are systematically starved and subjected to unimaginable torment. That's right, kids too. It's beyond brutal. Many never see the outside world again. Public executions happen for trivial offenses, like trying to watch foreign TV or listening to South Korean pop music. Yes, you heard that correctly. If you're caught with a K-pop playlist on your phone, you could wind up dead. That's how insane the system is. Former prisoner Shin Dong-yuk famously recounted watching his own mother's execution. Another defector, Kim Kwang-il, drew pictures showing how guards forced inmates into pigeon torture. Arms tied behind their backs, hung from a ceiling so they couldn't stand or sit. Fainting meant being whipped until they were conscious again. He also described the pump torture, forcing inmates to squat or jump repeatedly until their legs give out, only to be kicked and whipped back into motion. There's the motorcycle or car position, where victims must crouch with arms extended as if gripping handlebars, again enduring whips and kicks whenever they slip. Food rations are criminally low. People are so hungry they eat rats, frogs, and snakes alive just to survive. Let's not even get started on the forced labor. Some detainees spend 16 hours a day doing back-breaking work. Others are assigned to mines so unstable that cave-ins are basically guaranteed.
You literally have to crawl inside and digging coals out. And often mines collapsed, and many young, large boys and girls are killed or even losing their arms and legs.
Witnessing such nightmares is enough to break anybody, but it only fueled Timothy's drive to try escaping again. Now, how did Timothy survive? Sheer luck, some would say, or maybe the fact that he was a minor. After months of beatings and near starvation, he was unexpectedly released. That alone is extremely rare.
I was lucky, very a miracle. And when I was released from this prison cell, I could walk.
Though battered in body and spirit, he returned to his grandmother's home, watched by local authorities, and prayed he wouldn't get hauled back again. But if you think that'd stop him from seeking freedom once more, you'd be wrong. Timothy was barely recovering from his trauma and living under strict probation. Unable to bear the constant terror of surveillance, he soon committed to another daring plan to escape. His second escape route would be radically different. Instead of trekking to Mongolia, he'd pass through China, head to Shanghai, and then try to find sanctuary in a foreign-run institution like an embassy or international school. That might force the Chinese authorities into a diplomatic standstill, preventing them from deporting him back to North Korea. It was his ultimate Hail Mary. So in 2006, Timothy once again crossed the Tumen River into China. That border is guarded by barbed wire, electric fences, and watchtowers. He managed to slip through with a small group of refugees, forging IDs to move deeper into Chinese territory. Under the constant threat of arrest, they traveled over 1,200 miles by bus and train until they finally reached Shanghai. It's one of the world's biggest cities, a neon jungle that must have felt like another planet compared to North Korea's darkness. In 2007, Timothy and 8 others finally made it to the Shanghai American School, hoping it would be like stepping on US soil. A path to freedom.
We climbed up the fence of the American school. It was quite high. We climbed up and we went inside school. We had the paper. We are North Korean refugees, please help us. And we thought we were successful.
For a moment, adrenaline surged. Maybe this was it. Maybe they'd just beaten the system. But the school administrators, unprepared for this crisis, called the Chinese police. Within minutes, dozens of officers stormed in. They pinned Timothy to the ground, batons swinging right in front of horrified students. One teenage bystander reportedly said she'd never forget that sight, these desperate individuals being dragged away like criminals. Timothy found himself tossed into the Shanghai International Prison for foreign detainees. Paralyzed with dread, he thought, this is the end. Because being deported back to North Korea a second time was practically a guaranteed death sentence. So he tried to end his own life in that prison cell. Timothy swallowed the stash of sleeping pills he'd secretly hidden in his clothes, convinced it was his only way out. But fate had other plans. He woke up, disoriented yet alive, in the same miserable cell. Not exactly the rescue he hoped for, but things took an unexpected twist. One of his cellmates was a South Korean ex-gangster who'd found religion. This unlikely friend gave Timothy a Bible and prayed over him, urging him to hang in there. Meanwhile, outside those bleak prison walls, the story of the Shanghai Nine spread like wildfire. Some students at the Shanghai American School leaked photos of the group's arrest to a journalist. Human rights groups and various international communities latched onto the story, launching protests at Chinese embassies worldwide. That pressure worked. After weeks of global outcry, the Chinese government made a highly unusual decision. Instead of shipping Timothy and the others to North Korea, they would deport them to the Philippines. From there, South Korea and possibly the UN Refugee Agency stepped in. The day Timothy boarded a plane out of China, he couldn't believe his luck. He'd cheated death twice now.
When I left the prison cell, one of the prisoners said, We are seeing a miracle happen in front of our eyes.
Freed at last, Timothy traveled from Manila to Seoul, then onward to the United Kingdom. Although he'd already experienced modern city life in Shanghai, stepping once again into a world of dazzling skyscrapers, fully stocked stores, and uncensored internet left him wide-eyed all over again. A stark contrast to everything he'd known under North Korea's suffocating darkness. As of 2023, North Korea ranks second on the global list for most repressive media environments. That's a big reason why Timothy had no idea how the outside world functioned until he experienced it firsthand. After settling in Britain, Timothy learned English, pursued higher education, and decided to share his story, hoping to spotlight those still locked in North Korean gulags. He collaborated with groups like Open Doors UK, advocating for persecuted Christians, some 50,000 of whom may be imprisoned in North Korea's labor camps for their faith alone. That number, by the way, is nearly half of all individuals detained across the regime's broader penal system. Timothy's incredible resilience became a beacon for other defectors. But the question remains, what's it like to carry such memories? How do you speak about the unspeakable and not crumble? For Timothy Cho, the nightmares remain fresh, fueling him to keep speaking out. His story is a sobering reminder that behind every grim statistic on North Korea's atrocities stands a person with a family, a childhood, and fragile hopes for a better life. Now a vocal activist, Timothy shares his ordeal at schools, on news programs, and at international forums. You might wonder, what difference can one person make? Remember this, global awareness can save lives. In Timothy's case, photos of his mistreatment sparked an international outcry and changed his fate. More than 33,000 North Koreans have escaped to South Korea since the late 90s. Many endured ordeals as brutal or worse than Timothy's. Still, each story like his reminds us of the countless people still trapped behind the razor wire. Let his journey stand as both a warning and an inspiration, showing us what unchecked tyranny can produce and how human resilience can fight back. If you found Timothy's story unbelievable, stay tuned for our next episode. It explores the tragic case of Otto Warmbier, an American tourist imprisoned and tortured for a crime many believe he didn't commit. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, and keep watching How to Survive.